Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in Matthew chapter 26, Mark 14, Luke 22, and John 18. Starting in Matthew 26:48, Jesus was leaving the garden, or he was in the garden. Passover, the day is ended. They go back to where they rest every night, and Judas is coming to betray Jesus. Judas is coming with a group of officials from the chief priests. Basically, they're the Jewish law enforcement, and that's all Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us. But John will tell us later in his, and we read that at the very end of today's read, that there was also a group of Roman soldiers who came along, and this group of Roman soldiers would have been responsible for Jesus from the minute he's arrested to the minute he's crucified. So this group of Roman soldiers is going to be with Jesus the entire time. That could be important depending on how you look at it. It's always important to me to see how this group is with Jesus and kind of how they treat Jesus in the beginning and how they treat Jesus in the end. But anyway, so in 26:55, they're coming to get him at night, and they would all have known who Jesus was. They would have all known what he looked like. But Jesus makes a point between here and in verse 58, because they're coming to do this in the darkness. So only Judas is the one who really recognizes Jesus and goes up and gives them the signal that they're looking for. But Jesus says, why are you doing these evil deeds at night? Basically, I was in the temple with you during the day. You could have arrested me at any time. But you come to do this in the darkness where evil deeds are done. Then they arrest him. They take him. Peter, we learn in John, pulls out his sword and he cuts off the ear of the high priest's servant. And we learn something from Luke's gospel that we don't see in Matthew, Mark, or John. And if I mentioned this yesterday, Luke's a doctor, so he's got this different perspective, and he points out the things that are important to him, and some medical facts that are important to him. And so yesterday it was about the hematidrosis, the sweating of blood. He mentions that. Today in his gospel, he's the only one that mentions that Jesus stops everything and he heals the servant of the high priest who has his ear cut off, that Jesus completely heals that person. And again, that comes from John's perspective because he's a doctor, and that was important to him to see that miracle. So we see that Jesus gets arrested. They take him to the high priest for a trial, and it's dark. Remember, they've arrested him in the dark. Judas had to find Jesus and give them the signal, this is the one. So this trial is an illegal trial because it happens after dark, and the Jews could not hold court after dark. This trial is totally illegal, and they'll even kind of confirm that once they get their evidence to convict Jesus. They don't follow through with the punishment that they're allowed, and it's almost like, we're going to hold this trial, and then once they get what they want, they're like, but we're still not going to cross that line because this is illegal and we can't do this. So they don't condemn, they don't stone Jesus to death, even though that's the punishment of what they claim he's convicted of in this illegal trial, but they don't follow through and stone him. And that pretty much comes out in verse 66. Then we jump into Mark and get a little bit from what Mark's gospel has that Matthew's didn't have. Well, Matthew had a little bit of it, but in Mark's gospel it shows that Jesus is convicted because a witness comes forward and says Jesus said he's going to destroy this handmade temple, and then in 3 days he's going to rebuild it. Well, in everything we've read up to this point, Jesus never says, I'm going to destroy the handmade temple. Jesus says he's going to destroy, the temple's going to be destroyed. He's going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. He's talking about his body, talking about himself. He's the temple. He's going to be crucified on the cross, and 3 days later he's going to be raised from the dead. This is the temple he's talking about that's going to be rebuilt. So they twist his words, which twisting his words is a nice way of saying they completely lie about what he said he's going to do. And from that, the high priest decides, let's convict him. But it's not really based on that testimony that they finally convict him. We see in Luke 14:62 that the high priest asks Jesus a direct question. And this is the only time Jesus opens up his mouth and answers, because this is the only time legally he is bound to answer the question. See, Jesus is still following the law, the man-made law, just like Romans 13. He's following the earthly rule. Just like he'll speak to Pilate when Pilate asks him a direct question. Just like when his mom told him to turn water into wine at Canaan. He follows that earthly authority. I don't think he answers any of the questions or accusations before that, because he wasn't legally bound by Jewish law to do so. Only when he was questioned by the high priest. And then in Luke 22:51, this is where Luke gives the verse where Jesus heals the high priest's servant, and John will tell us in 18:10 that the name of this guy is Malchuk, and John also is the one who finally names Peter as the one with the sword. But this healing of the ear is very important, I think, and I'm glad John has that perspective. And then the last one in John 18, verse 5 through 8, Jesus predicted and told Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. But then, in contrast to that, when they come to arrest Jesus, Jesus doesn't deny anything. Matter of fact, Jesus says, here I am he. Tells them that. Then he tells them again, I'm the guy you're looking for, I'm he. And when he does, there's such power that comes from Christ that it knocks him back. Anyway, 3 times Jesus says, look, I'm the guy, come get me. Peter denies him 3 times. Jesus answers 3 times, confesses, reveals that he's the Son of Man. He is Jesus Christ from Nazareth. The number 3 is a big theme throughout this last Passion Week. Tomorrow we're going to be in Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 22 and 23, and then John 18 and 19. So be safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.